I don't know how long I can do this today. I keep managing to screw it up. What happened is I decided I wanted to stream, and I decided to do so in the same fashion that I typically do. No big deal. And what ended up happening is I, I was going through the motions, was talking about a bunch of stuff. And then I had that moment where I, I was reading something that I wrote that is posted in a private forum. And as I was reading it, I thought, this is good. This is perfectly fine for me to be sharing. And then I got to a point in this post that shares a piece of information that the part of me that is hyper aware of, I guess what I guess you could say, my inability to judge whether or not um, things are appropriately socially acceptable or will be viable from the perspective of, if a potential employer were to find this, would this be okay? And and it was the kind of information that, like, I'm not necessarily embarrassed about, and it's not something, I mean, I obviously shared it. I shared it on my personal Facebook page. I shared it with, 500 plus people, because there's, like, the funny thing is that I would say at this point in my life I have no close friends, and that's not to be offensive to anybody in my life. I just, there are people that I'm closer to, but with the exception of family members, I don't really have a lot of kind of go to people in times of need or stress, or, people that I believe I could admit a lot of things to that would continue to be supportive of me. So, so I feel like those are kind of the criteria I have for close friendships. So, that being said, I'm pretty outspoken and forthright and revealing of myself. I like to help other people. I run a support group. I do a few different things. So what ends up happening is that people will find me in a public forum, and then they will request for us to be friends. And so on something like Facebook, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I have certain kind of restricted lists and stuff like that that I'll put strangers on versus people that I actually know, I just am not super close to, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, I had posted this thing on my personal Facebook page, so anybody who's like on my actual friends list can read it. But I thought, this is great. I'm gonna share this on the stream. We're gonna go ahead and kind of make everybody privy to how I conceptualize the struggle and the balance and the fight that so many people are dealing with. But in that first post that I was reading, it got to this place where I was like, this is a piece of information that from a job search perspective, I would never say this within like an interview. And, generally speaking, if I was gainfully employed, if I didn't have to worry about my bills getting paid and all of that stuff, I probably wouldn't even worry about it. But the fact that I'm kind of like I'm asking people to consider me for employment makes me feel hyper vigilant. Like so I I kind of panicked and I backed out. I closed down the stream, deleted it, even though I had made like I had been on the stream for like half an hour and I had already talked through an entire like perspective on um, the imbalance of unemployment and all of that stuff. So she's giving me side eye now. I'll give you a pet, but I just go play. Like I don't know. Anyway, what I was really going for today was just trying to get like a little bit of company while I was accomplishing something I needed to take care of for my day. And instead, I give myself this panic moment, delete a bunch of content, and then I relaunched the stream, and for whatever reason, it had retained information from when I streamed on Friday. So um, when I relaunched it, didn't make any sense, and so then I had to stop again, and I had to bring it back up, and yeah, so we're finally in a position where I can actually talk and hopefully eventually connect with people. um I guess it's just a dumbass day. I don't know. All the while I'm trying to fill out like my unemployment stuff, and yeah. Let's see. These are difficult times though, it's just like you want I want life to be easier, which I mean, who doesn't want life to be easier is such a stupid thing to say, but I mean, for real. I was talking to my partner the other day and I said, I don't understand why I have to like do all this stuff because I truly thought that um like the job search criteria was um like on hold or whatever, at least for right now, but I guess not. So I don't know. Like it's hard. One of the things that I talked about was like this idea that um we're all trying to um ow. Sorry, like I just hit like a spot on my nose that I wasn't as well prepared for my attention as it would have been nice to have been. That doesn't make any sense. Whatever. Forget I said it. I don't know. I don't know what to do. Just get up in my stuff, I guess. Silly cat. Anyway, so I'm currently trying to fill out all of my stuff. Trying to um, I don't know, trying to prove something to myself, maybe trying to. Obviously, I am distracted. The reason why I'm distracted is this is um, it's like super important. Like I need to um, I need I I need the job. Well, I need the job, but I also need um I need to I need to get the benefit. That's what I'm going for. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, you know, I put my name in and said, "Hey, I'm one of the huddled masses where I'm wrecked and destroyed or whatever," and like I'm struggling. I could use some help. I could use a little bit of money. I could use whatever, and yeah. But you can't get the money if you don't put it in there, and if you don't put your names in there, you don't tell them that you actually made an effort to do something with the time that you've had, then they just make that decision and say, you know what, we won't give you no monies. You didn't try hard enough. But I also have to appropriately distract myself. And this is how I got most of my work done during college. I would sit there and I when I was in college, back in the day when we still had Yahoo Games to mess around with, um, I would have like a game of Mahjong Solitaire on one screen, and I would have um, my paper or whatever I was working on the other screen, and uh, would spend an inordinately imbalanced amount of time working on the solitaire versus the paper that I was supposed to be working on, and somehow still always managed to make it work. Not entirely sure how, but I never really had to worry about it. That's one of those things that I've had to like remind myself about on a number of occasions when talking to people about our like school experiences and stuff, was that even in situations where I felt like I was struggling or failing or um, whatever descriptor word you want to use here, uh, the experience I was having was not reflective of most people's experiences. Like, I had a pretty easy time of it, all things considered. Sometimes I wish I had to try harder. Like, sometimes I wish that it was more difficult for me to get through school. I had very few things that I had to try at. In high school, the only thing I really remember having to work to not fail was the first semester of calculus, and I remember being extremely stressed out about it. The second thing was history, but that's because for whatever reason, like my name recognition has always been pretty bad, and um, that was certainly no exception. Um, but what I found was when I got to college and my college professor for, American history, uh, she didn't care if you got the name wrong. She cared if you knew the sequence of events. So miraculously, I did phenomenally better in a history class that focused more on the sequence of events and learning from our mistakes in the past and, understanding, you know, things like, I mean, this is super basic, and if you don't know this, then, like, your even your logic is gone, but, it's the first thing that came to mind, but, you know, she cared more that you understood that World War One happened before World War Two, because one becomes comes before two. She cared way more about that than if you knew the names of the battles, like super specifically. She cared more about you knowing in general what countries were on what side, you know. And if you got relatively close to the actual names of like leadership for those countries, that was bonus. Like, obviously, like she it wasn't like you would get an A plus if you got all the names wrong, but rather you could get the names wrong and still get a B. And so, like, I went through uh, many history classes that were not like that, where the teachers were super strict about the names and had very few, like tips or tricks or whatever to try and help you understand or remember what those names were and all of this stuff. So, like, I'd find myself getting super frustrated and feeling like I just was never going to get to where I needed to be, and just hoping that I could, like, take as little history as possible, because even though I like telling stories and even though I find history generally fascinating, especially things to do with like social justice, the idea of having to take years and years of history classes and failing miserably because I couldn't remember names was like a nightmare to me. Speaking of which, I had a fascinating sort of nightmare the other day, which is the reason why I started reading this private Facebook post in the first place. And it wasn't just the other day, it was just last night. Um, I wanted to read the initial post that I had made, um, like the post that I ended up like kind of freaking out about a little bit. Uh, I had written it because I was really struggling with like a mental moment. I'm not used to feeling frail, even though, like, arguably I've had probably more frailty or, questions about my, I don't know, longevity or survivability, or whatever you want to say, um, as an adult than a lot of people I know have. Um, I think I still generally perceive myself to be a strong person. I think that a lot of people still consider me as such. And so it can be really difficult to kind of spend time recognizing the fact that the, that might not be the exact case. And um, so a lot of times I don't really talk about a whole lot of stuff in the same candid way that I would really need to get any kind of like emotional relief or support. And I think that it's really frustrating because with Facebook, they mess with the display of things in such a way that I find myself wondering if people are just not reading my post because it's an essay and it takes a long time and all of this stuff. Or is Facebook just not showing that I wrote anything at all? And so I'm begging for support and help, essentially. And this algorithm is encouraging a thought process that supports the assumption that nobody gives a shit about me. And so it's been a very weird and difficult um, thing to kind of weed through. And, but I've been working through it, right? So I've just been kind of doing what I gotta do. Um, but I wrote this whole thing, and I know at least a couple of people saw it because I had a couple of people respond. So that was cool. but it was like I kind of like took the cork out of a bottle, because then I went and laid down. Well, I mean, I wrote it like in the middle of the day, and then I went and finally got myself out on the road and did a couple of deliveries and just kind of did what I had to do. And um, then, eventually came back home, and just like any other person does. And what ended up happening though is I went to sleep, and I had this incredibly vivid dream, and I really wanted to, I don't know, share the connection with that experience, the dream that I had. But the vulnerability that it requires and the risk that it would mean in the context of a job hunt prevents me from feeling completely comfortable in sharing the lead in post, which is why it got deleted. I'm also getting really warm for some reason. was just looking at my peer counseling messages real quick, and this person said they want to change their sexuality because they're short and they feel like they're heterosexual by mistake. And I am not sure how you respond to that. Because it's like, when it comes to things like sexuality, I know like we've talked about it some on the channel before. And I certainly don't want to act like I'm some super expert, because even though like I have spent a decent chunk of time um studying and being involved in the community and stuff like that, I very much hesitate to be speaking on behalf of anyone other than myself. So that's the caveat. It's like, this is my opinion and my understanding, and I fully recognize and accept and understand that I could be completely not in alignment with what is considered the current popular status quo understanding, and I highly encourage people to seek multiple opinions, we'll say. But I have always thought of sexuality to be like twofold, because I think that there's people who do kind of fall into this camp of choice, though I think that the vast majority of people do not choose something like their sexual orientation. Now, I know that it's a controversial thing for me to say that I think anyone chooses their sexual orientation, but I think that there's specific circumstances that applies. And I don't think that they're the kind of circumstances that would have been considered the problematic or, traditional choice circumstances from, our social history. Because it used to be, back in the 50s, 60s, or, potentially before that, the thought process was, if you let a boy play with dolls, then he'll grow up and be gay, and, stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. When I am talking about sexuality by choice, I'm talking about things like situational influences that change our perspective on intimacy, change our perspective on trust, and our ability to connect with other people. So a person can be born heterosexual, but because of their circumstances, um, they might choose or develop an alternative expression of sexuality within certain circumstances. So one of the most commonly or routinely recognized circumstances that would apply to this thought process would be within the judicial system, or in prison. So like long-term prison system, like inmates, it's kind of classic, right? It's kind of this almost cliche thing where people create relationships and alliances or whatever, and even to the point where they'll make declarations like they're going to get married when they get out of jail and stuff. But, um, some of those people are, in fact, you know, the orientation that they would need to be in order to have those relationships outside of jail, but some of those people don't. They have those relationships within the jail because of the human need for connection and intimacy and affection. I think we greatly underestimate how important it is to feel connected and how validating touch and interactions and receiving hugs and kisses and validation from another person, how important that can really be for our mental health and for our perspective on ourselves and our sense of worth within the world. And I can absolutely understand how a person who is incarcerated for 10 years would find themselves practically desperate to find a source for that feeling in the environment that they're in. But that doesn't mean that they, have permanently switched orientations or anything like that. It just means that they are finding their they're fulfilling their needs, and they're finding finding resources within their circumstances. I know that's like super freaking cold to say it that way, but I'm like, if you don't continue the relationship outside of that context, then it leads to the questions surrounding like the validity of that relationship. And so I think it's a super valid relationship. I think it's just contextual. But at the same time, we also see certain choice based relationships develop outside of things. Like, you don't have to be in the prison system to make those choices. We also see people making choices like that, particularly after being exposed to extreme abuse or violence. So you could be somebody who considers themselves to be a heterosexual, but because of your exposure to violence or circumstances with the opposite sex, be unable to open yourself to intimacy or have extreme trust issues with people. But that doesn't remove your need or your desire for connection. And so, in certain circumstances, a person can say, I am going to pursue a relationship with somebody of the same sex instead of somebody of the opposite sex. And that way they can fulfill their need for human, validation and attachment and all of those things without exposing themselves to the danger that comes with experiencing their trauma. So I guess you could say, like, even though I think that there are circumstances in which things are a choice, I think they are very, very specific circumstances. And in general, a person can't just look in the mirror and say, you know what, I don't like what I see. And I think it would be easier to be the other, the opposite, or, in this circumstance, guys, like, I'm short, dude. Think it'd be easier to be a woman, so how do I make it so that I feel differently, so that I'm actually a woman instead of being a short man? And, it's like, well, you can't just like pop a pill or something and suddenly feel like a woman. Like, it doesn't work like that. Let's see here. I don't. It's so stupid. Like, I don't. Like, I'm trying to finish this claim, and it's asking for my information. No, I don't. That's not what I'm trying to do. Like, I don't need to make any more contacts. I need to put in my earnings. Anyway. think maybe I'll just end the stream for today. Thought I'd check in real quick. I've hung out for a little bit, mumbled for a little bit. I'm getting hungry. I'm getting tired. I'm getting boring. I hope anybody who sees this, I hope you take care of yourself. Be well. Be safe. Email me at the email below. Let's talk. Let's get questions going. Let's get some stories going. As I keep saying and I keep forgetting, I do plan to schedule some things with some topics and all of that. I'd love it if people would tell me what they'd like to talk about. Otherwise, we'll just kind of start getting things set up and moving forward. So, until next time, I'll see ya. Peace.